So, hey, we're going to be in the book of Jeremiah this morning. And the book of Jeremiah reflects the events surrounding the downfall of Jerusalem by the Babylonians. So the fall of Jerusalem by the Babylonians in the year 587 BC. When the Babylonians came into Jerusalem and ransacked the city, and they took the people in Jerusalem and around Jerusalem and took them out of their homeland and forced them to live in this foreign land called Babylon. And by the time we pick up this story later in Jeremiah, so Jeremiah chapter 29, there were some of Israel's prophets coming along saying, don't worry, God's got this. Your exodus out of here is imminent. God is coming for you soon. Which, by the way, would have been what every ancient Israelite in exile would have wanted to hear. And by the time we get to Jeremiah 29, we're a few years into the exile. And so this prophet Jeremiah comes along. And he's still living in Jerusalem. And he gives this really unsettling message. Jeremiah 29, 4 through 7. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Get married and have children. But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile. And pray to the Lord on its behalf. For in its welfare you will find your welfare. Now that's a really messed up message, isn't it? I mean, why would Jeremiah come along to people in exile, to his own people in exile who are suffering, and give this kind of message? I mean, what does he know? He's still in Jerusalem. What does he know? And isn't it always easy for outsiders to look into your pain and suffering and start saying things like this? Oh, just carry on. Just carry on. It'll get better. Oh, they're harming you. Just pray for them. Just pray for them. Pray for the city because your welfare depends on it. Like their welfare has something to do with your welfare. Why does Jeremiah give this message to suffering people? Jeremiah knows his why. He knows why he's here and why he exists in the world. He knows that he's called to be present, to speak into the lives of those who are experiencing pain and suffering, and at times an unbearable, unspeakable pain and suffering. And by the way, Jeremiah isn't exactly an outsider when it comes to pain and suffering from his own people. You see, if we're to back up 9 chapters, we arrive at Jeremiah chapter 20. And in Jeremiah chapter 20, you have this really brutally honest prayer, and it's one of the most beautiful prayers in all of Scripture. And it gives us a bit of Jeremiah's backstory. And in this prayer, Jeremiah is crying out to God, God, what has happened to my people? What has happened to my people? We were called by you to be a tribe who blesses all the other tribes and nations, and now look at us. I mean, here we are building a temple on the backs of slave labor. And God, look at us. The high priest, the one who was supposed to preserve the story, that we're a tribe to bless and love all the other tribes and nations. The high priest is now keeping all the temple taxes for himself and using it for self-gain. I mean, God, look at us. And things have gotten so bad with my own people, they're starting now to crucify or to sacrifice their own children to other gods as some sort of last-ditch effort to get the gods on their side. And in this prayer, it's like Jeremiah says, God, I didn't even want to do this prophet stuff. You called me into this, but I didn't even want to do it. Check it out. Here's what he says. Lord, you enticed me, and I was taken in. You were too strong for me and you prevailed. And now I'm laughed at all the time. Everyone mocks me. Every time I open my mouth, I cry out and say, violence and destruction. The Lord's word has brought me nothing but insult and injury constantly. And see, you know why he says these words? Because this prophet rises up and he speaks against these things happening. And what happens? The high priest, the one who's supposed to preserve the story, has him severely beaten, thrown in chains, publicly humiliated. Man, Jeremiah's got some grief and loss going on, doesn't he? And what happened to my people? It wasn't supposed to go down this way. The story was supposed to be better. What happened to my people? Have you ever felt this? Have you ever looked out over your people, over your schools, or your workplace, your community, your neighborhood, and said, man, what happened to my people? It wasn't supposed to go down this way. The story was supposed to be better. What happened to my people? And see, I hate to be the Debbie Downer here on a Sunday when we're celebrating 22 years of Miss Kay serving as the director of Little School, and when we're celebrating all the graduates in our midst. But man, the truth is, we've got some realities that we have to deal with. Did you know that the World Health Organization predicts that by the year 2030, depression will be the single leading cause of disability globally? And are y'all hearing that? By the year 2030, that's in 13 years from now, the World Health Organization is predicting that depression, not common diseases of things like cancer and diabetes and heart disease, but depression will be the single leading cause of disability globally. We were sitting in a meeting with Reverend Sally a few weeks ago, and she let us know something that I wasn't aware of, and this has stuck with me. Maybe you were aware of this, but Colorado has one of the highest suicide rates in the entire country. And for some of you, this hits close to home, I know that. And see, this rate, it just keeps on climbing. In the last 10 years ago, it was at 16.5 suicides per 100,000 residents. And today it's at 19.4. Dang. And did you know 478,000 Coloradans today struggle with mental illness? And did you know when it comes to drug and alcohol abuse and addiction in nearly every category, Colorado ranks right up towards the top? What happened to our people? It wasn't supposed to go down this way. The story was supposed to be way better than this. And see, maybe you had hope, but dang, you just keep losing it. You just keep losing it. I met with Amy McMullen. Where's Amy? There's Amy. Amy McMullen, our assistant youth director. I met with her a couple of weeks ago to talk about some of these issues. And see, Amy, she is also studying to get her master's in counseling at Regis University with a specialty in child and adolescent counseling. And after our meeting, she sent me a follow-up email, and I want to share with you some of what she wrote in her email so y'all get a sense of what we're dealing with here. She said, teen depression, self-harm, and suicide have become such a problem that conversations and training around the subject are common practice for us staff and volunteers. Parents, are you listening? We have over 30 schools represented in youth group. We've had to compile lists of who goes where so we know who's affected and who to reach out to when crisis hits. Literally, that is why we have this particular database. Students, are you listening? As youth leaders, we are called to serve all youth, not just the ones in our building. which means we are not only mentoring our youth in need, but we are the ones our youth come to when they are worried about friends at school outside of St. Luke's youth. My brothers and sisters, are we living in a sort of exile? Having been brought into a land that we know very little about. Having been brought into a land that no one of us would have chosen. And now we're surrounded by disconnection, isolation, and despair. And see, the question becomes, how do we step out of this cycle? How do we step out of the cycle that only stagnation is real? That nothing is ever going to really change, that nothing good will ever come? How do we step out of it? And so allow me to make 2 suggestions. The first is it's time to get honest. And the second is it's time for you to figure out your why. And I'm not a healthcare professional, so I want to tread lightly when it comes to talking about issues of mental illness. But here's what I do know about depression. Depression carries with it, it brings with it the greatest form of despair. And see, despair, it's this really tricky thing, because what despair does is it comes along to you and it tells you some of the most persuasive and the greatest lies. Despair tells you that things aren't going to change. You see, most of us, if we're honest, we can handle a hard day. We can handle a hard week, even a hard season. But despair says something different. This is the way it is, and it's never going to change. It's the way it is forever. You see, when you get cancer, people show up to your door and they show up with flowers. And they say, hang in there. We're going to do this together. Don't give up. But see, when you get depression, people don't really show up. They kind of stand back at a distance. And they say things like, man, can't you snap out of this? Come on, man, it's not that bad. Or how about this one? You're strong. You're still dealing with this? Come on, you're strong. Man, I know we say things with the best of intentions, and often because we don't know what to say, but those things simply aren't helpful. You know, when my brother died when I was first-year student in college, next few years were pretty rough. They were dark years in my life. And thank God for depression medication, because I believe it saved my being. And see, I can remember people coming to me and saying with the best of intentions, come on, dude, you're strong. You're strong. And I hated it. I hated it because all it said to me was, keep wearing the mask. Keep it together on the outside. And it made me really confused because I couldn't figure out, if I'm so strong, then why am I feeling all this darkness in here? Why can't I beat it? Stop saying that to people who are battling depression. If I can, I'd like to recommend a book to you. It's a book that I'm in the middle of right now, and it is a phenomenal book. I think we have it on the screen. It's a book called Emotional Agility, Get Unstuck, Embrace Change, and Thrive in Work and Life, and it's written by Susan David. She's a psychologist at Harvard. And man, she comes along and she says, isn't it interesting that we live in this world that tells us to simply meet negative feelings with positive feelings? Let's just self-talk our way out of this. Let's just meet adversity with positive feelings. And she says, this is strange because research tells us this doesn't work. Research tells us this isn't true. And isn't it interesting, from the time of a young age as we were kids, I mean, how often were we told, now you just go to your room and you don't come out until you get a smile on your face? Were you told that? Come on now. I mean, how often were we told that? We might even tell our own kids that. And the message is, go to your room, change the feelings, and then you can participate in the world when you get the happy on. Stop putting judgment on your feelings. Feelings are feelings. Let them be as they are. She has this really great line where she says, one of the greatest human triumphs is to choose to make room in our hearts for both the joy and the pain, and to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. This means seeing feelings not as being good or bad, but as just being. I can be the king at trying to judge my feelings. Oh, I shouldn't be angry about that. It's just so petty and no one's going to understand, but why is this thing bothering me? Oh, my heart shouldn't break over this. It's petty, no one's going to understand. Why is this bothering me? Stop judging your feelings. It's about getting honest and being okay with who you are and what you feel. And I think it's why Jeremiah's prayer resonates so deeply, because it has this kind of brutal honesty in it that we all crave. Second thing, figure out your why. Figure out why you're here and what you're about. You see, the prophet Jeremiah, he knew his why. He knew that he was here not just to serve himself, but to serve others. And I love the way he ends his prayer. Verse 9, still in chapter 20. And he's talking about God here. I thought, I'll forget God. I'll no longer speak God's name. But there's an intense fire in my heart, trapped in my bones. I am a prophet. God has called me. I'm drained trying to contain it. I'm unable to do it. You see, his why allowed him to say to his people in exile who were suffering, allowed him to say, you must carry on. You must carry on and look out for the welfare of others. Look out for pray for the place where you've been sent, because its welfare determines your welfare. Now, I don't know your why. I don't know what gets you out of bed in the morning. I don't know where in the world you find purpose and meaning and significance, but I do know this. You were not meant to be merely a consumer. You are not meant to be merely someone who looks in on the suffering, who's an onlooker at exile. You are meant to look out for the welfare of others, to help others find their healing so that you might find a sense of your own healing and wholeness. Figure out your why. The intense fire, the thing trapped in your bones. What is that thing? What are the things that bring you life so that you might bring life to others who so desperately need it? Because see, when you figure out your why, then what you do in the world all of a sudden carries more weight, more power, more significance. So I want to show you all this video on the importance of figuring out your why and why this matters.